check out the everyday savings and selection and come into the nearest Buy Right Lighting showroom today and buy right.
We're coming through for you.
Good morning. How about a little Webster inquest into the disaster which was the BC Federation of Labour Convention in Vancouver last weekend? The only guy who's really happy about it, I'm sure, is good old Premier Bill Bennett of the Social Credit Government in Victoria. He now faces a firmly divided opposition, riven and split, which at the drop of a hat will give him the instant confrontation he often seeks. It is very bad news for the ordinary trade union member and the ordinary worker and the ordinary boss in British Columbia. Who's to blame? Well, a number of people are to blame, but one who must take a fair share of the blame is none other than Jack Monroe of the IWA. And I think this little clip shows best the depth of enmity which exists among the various groups in the BC Fed.
Jack Monroe, 455. Clark Gruttman, 318.
Monroe's enemy, Gruntman, takes the key job of first vice president, traditionally belonged to the IWA, and watch the snub. That was the snub. Now, did Monroe muff this convention? Well, Monroe was in a jackpot. First of all, after the public fights with QB, he couldn't possibly support QB. So he puts up the woman Joy Langan. But Jack didn't count the heads close enough. And when his delegate, his woman, some called her a puppet, lost and was third on the first count, he had no place to go but to QB. He went to QB, QB was elected. But the whole balance of the Federation is divided now into two clear groups. There's the Harry Rankin of the Labour movement, Frank Kennedy of the Longshoremen, who almost made it. Harry is of the militant left, backed by some commies, and he is in bed with the militant right of the public service unions as represented by the BCGEU. This means there is now no middle ground for the ordinary industrial unions. And when Monroe was defeated, that puts the IWA, certainly for the moment, right out in the cold, cold snow. Is there bitterness? Of course there's bitterness. Will Monroe pull the IWA, the second biggest union, out of the BC Fed? I would say certainly not for the moment. It depends what happens. But there are so many annoyances. You see, you've got the communist-led Fishermen's Union, which kicks in a paltry $16,000 a year for delegates. Every two men in a rowboat constitute a local and a delegate, and they have 78 delegates for $16,000. The IWA pays $200,000 and barely gets double the number of delegates. But that's all spilt milk. That doesn't matter really very much. What will it in fact do to the attitude and the political stance of the Fed? Well, I think it can be best put to you like this. And I want all the civil servants in the little offices, because it's the public sector unions, allied with the militant left for the moment, who now totally control the Fed. And remember, Monroe, of course, made no particular secret of the fact during the Solidarity crisis that he was damned if he was going to support the BCGEU all the way, because he knew very well they wouldn't support him all the way, because the IWA unions are the ones who have suffered most in the economic crunch. The industrial unions know that if the boss goes bankrupt, they're out of a job. whereas the public service unions can always, except for trimming and attrition, be quite sure that their job is secure in the main because of the taxpayers' base to pay the bleeding wages. That was one of the long-term irritants. But for all the civil servants this morning, I want to congratulate you, all of you, for giving or going to give $40,000 to the Marxist-Leninist who's trying to smash democracy in Britain. I wonder if many of you realize that the fishermen's delegates led the battle on the floor to raise pledges for Arthur Scargill, the man who is denigrated by all the leadership of the normal Labour Party and the unions in Britain. And they raised $20,000 from the floor in cash and pledges. And then there were cries from the floor, match the grant, match the grant. And guess who seconded the motion for the Federation of Labour to put in another $20,000? That's $40,000, if they can find the $20,000 in the Fed's funds, to go from this federation and from working unionists in British Columbia to Arthur Scargill, the man who is leading Britain down the drain with his coal strike. 20,000 from the delegates and 20,000 from the BC Federation of Labour. And one of the funny to me, but ironic to the people involved, is that there are some officials of the BC Fed who want to make sure that their severance pay and holiday pay and car allowances are paid before they quit, before the money is found to send it to the Marxist-Leninist Scargill, who runs the National Union of Mine Workers in Britain. So to sum it up, oh, by the way, Frank Kennedy didn't quite make it, but Kennedy himself made it on the Federation executive from his slate. I think it's 24 out of 25. And Kennedy makes no secret where he stands, and he's going to be the power behind the throne. Won't be long before he and Adams have a punch-up together, I'm quite sure. Kennedy is the guy, Vancouver District Labour Council, the co-chairman of the Peace Marches, and he's the kind of kingmaker of the Harcourt Cope coalition in Vancouver. So you can see why I can say that with QB as a lame duck, the militant left, very strongly represented, including the communists on the board, and of course the militant, or the right, I should say, the public sector unions, who are glad they've got rid of Monroe. At least for the moment they're glad. Will Monroe pull out of the Fed? I don't think so, but they will pull out of all committees. They refused, declined nomination for the table officers and the other positions on the Fed. So it's good news for Arthur Scargill this morning, good news for Premier Bennett, bad news for the IWA, because they did not handle themselves too well in that they wiped out their instant influence and will have to stand on the sidelines. And good news for Frank Kennedy and the boys on the extreme left. Bad news for the people of British Columbia. But we go through these things. And the economy is so bad just now anyway, perhaps nothing will be affected. Oh, and Gautier's in there too. The penny farthing boy, the Building Trades Council, the sites down at Expo. It should be very interesting. Anyway, next we're going to look at a clip from a press conference of Prime Minister Mulroney and find out later what it means.
Read CTV. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Prime Minister, this is a brief two-part question. There have been a number of press reports in the daily press over recent weeks speculating on contributions to your various campaigns. First part of my question is this. Has Mr. Walter Wolf made any contributions to any of your campaigns apart from the $24,000 or so that has already been established? And second,
I beg your pardon?
Do you favor,
I beg your
or
pardon?
would you support the passage of laws in Canada, similar to those in the United States, which would require the full public disclosure of all contributions to all campaigns?
Well, you made a very serious misstatement of fact in regard to your first question. The answer to the first question is no, and the answer to your second question is yes.
Perhaps we can find out this morning from L. Ian MacDonald, who's got what certainly reads like the authorized biography of Mulroney, the making of the Prime Minister? And Ian will answer my questions, hopefully. I want to find out about this guy, you know. We know very little about him. He's still very much a pig in a poke. No personal references intended, of course. And then we're going to turn to a war book this morning for the first Canadian field commander who's written what they tell me is a pretty horrifying book about Crazy Tuesday in 1944. Brigadier General, we still call them Brigadier Generals here, Denis Whitaker, who has written it along with his wife, Shelagh Whitaker, Tug of War, the Canadian victory that opened Antwerp and could have ended the war a lot sooner than it did, as I gather. Now, do you recognize this woman? Eh? I don't know if I will. I haven't seen the clip yet.
A shoulder there for me to cry on. The hours alone that I'm without you. All I ever do is think about you. No one else could be so understanding, even though my love is so...
Music always upsets me on this program. It is, of course, Petula Clark, who's dropping in towards the end of the program. But first, who is this man Mulroney? Does he really have a drinking problem? After the break. Ian MacDonald, Mulroney, the making of a Prime Minister. Is this the authorized autobiography?
No, it's not authorized in any sense, although he did cooperate with me to the extent of giving me 6 formal interviews and 2 long background discussions and open up some of his files and most of his colleagues to be interviewed.
Do you reckon they were frank and straightforward with you?
Most of the time, I think.
What did that clip mean? Who is Wolf? Why did he get so uppity about the $75,000? Isn't Wolf in your book, the kind of Cogger-Wolf connection?
Yes, Wolf is, Walter Wolf is a guy who lives in the fast lane who was interested in the review process and I suppose contributed some money to it. The clip that you showed, Jack, the reporter from CTV asked the wrong question because at the time there was no leadership campaign as such and the question was phrased wrongly. It was donations to your leadership campaign, which gave Mulroney the deniability to be not sanctimonious, but certainly to blink his eyes a little bit there.
What part did Mulroney play? You've covered it very skimpily in your book in the Wagner. What do you call that? The fund.
The Wagner Trust.
Wagner Trust. Wagner was a judge, as I recall. Am I correct?
Yes.
And Wagner was set up, a $300,000 trust fund was set up for him so that he could take part in the campaign for the leadership a couple of times ago. And then Wagner denied in public anything had been set up. Was it Mulroney who initiated that $300,000 campaign for Wagner? Perfectly properly, I suppose, in terms of Quebec politics.
Well, Mulroney was, and Mulroney's role in the Wagner Trust is detailed for the first time here. Certainly Mulroney was one of those who made the initial approaches to Wagner. He was probably aware that Finlay MacDonald, then the national campaign director, was setting up the trust. The deal was closed by a Toronto lawyer named Eddie Goodman.
Fast Eddie,
whom Mulroney picked up at the Montreal airport, drove to Wagner's house, waited in the living room while Goodman cut the deal, and then drove him back to the airport. So he was the wheelman. He drove the getaway car, like Belmondo in the French cinema.
Now, you paint a picture of a fresh-faced young fellow with a crew cut, whipping around town as a neophyte in politics saying, I'm going to be Prime Minister, I'm going to be Prime Minister. Was the guy paranoid about becoming Prime Minister? This is kind of from log cabin to White House syndrome?
No, but I think he, you know, young boys, I suppose some of them lie awake at night and hear trains passing in the night. Some of them dream of playing for the Montreal Canadiens, not the Vancouver Canucks, I don't think, this week. And some of them dream of being Prime Minister. Some of them probably dream of being Jack Webster when they grow up.
How do you deal with a guy who only wanted one thing in life, to be Prime Minister? This indicates an incredible singleness of purpose.
Well, I think losing in '76 was the best thing that ever happened to him. It helped him grow up. It helped him, he had to go through the bitterness of losing that. And as he said later, he found out he wasn't going to be Pope. And I think after that he was, when he came out of the bitterness eventually, about 1980, after Mr. Clark's defeat significantly, he was less obsessed with the idea of being Prime Minister.
And one thing I want to know, it's probably admirable in every which way, shape or form, did he have a severe drinking problem? You talk about the party days, of course, when he, in the early 70s, he was cutting deals, hatching conspiracies, and keeping the company of a steady stream of attractive women. Was he drinking too much in those days?
Were you?
That's purely beside the point and of no relevance whatsoever. I am not Prime Minister. You write a book about the Prime Minister, and there have been remarks too that he no longer drinks. Did he have a severe problem?
I think he has probably a high lifetime batting average, even though he's no longer on the booze. He gave it up, I think, because it didn't like him very much, and it tended to exacerbate his bitterness after '76.
Oh, I think it's an admirable thing to have done, to stop drinking altogether, you know, because everyone's very frank about these things nowadays.
And I think it may have been a signal for Mr. Clark, as Conrad Black observed, to start taking Mulroney seriously.
The one thing that's lacking in the book is you don't get any kind of, apart from the fact that he's got this paranoid desire to be Prime Minister, he doesn't have any great philosophy, does he? Is he a kind of a thin man mentally?
He has
conspiracy hatcher.
He has no great intellectual pretensions, if that's what you mean, Jack.
Yeah.
He's not a Trudeau. He doesn't have a deep formation in political philosophy or political science or anything like that. But he does begin, I think, from certain ideas of the country. I think you saw that in the position he took in the Manitoba language, minority language problem in the fall of '83 and the winter of '84. And he made a couple of excellent speeches in the House that he wrote himself. So there is some depth to the man. He begins from the idea of the two founding peoples and goes from there.
How difficult was it for his handlers to keep him muzzled during the campaign, except for the famous debates?
Well, I think that was a test of his discipline and of his will to win, of this guy whom, as you know, and you know him a little bit, who loves nothing better than to shoot the breeze with the boys, who was able to, with one notable exception, stay at the front of the plane and keep his mouth shut for 60 days. That was, to me, the test of how much he wanted the job. The only incident, the only aberrational aspect of that was the time that he wandered to the back of the plane and started talking about the Liberal patronage appointments, thinking naively, I think, that it was off the record.
That was when the time when he was talking about political whores, as I recall.
The quote was, "There's no whore like an old whore."
No whore like an old whore. And he learned his lesson, and he did exactly what his handlers did on each and every occasion.
In fact, he didn't even come on your program, I think, largely on their advice.
Well, of course he would not come on my program, but and a month or two later, the press in the East discovered that he wasn't talking to anybody, and the Globe and Mail began to write editorials. Don't you think that the press were kind of gutless throughout that whole campaign?
I think that's the kind of assessment that can be made only by people outside our business, academics and professors and student groups doing body counts, appraisals of press coverage. Certainly, I think Mulroney succeeded in setting his own agenda, and he was quite determined that nobody was going to push him off it, and nobody did for 60 days. For example, he knew, I think, that there was going to have to be a reckoning on the universality question. He chose deliberately and perhaps cynically not to discuss it, because that would have given Mr. Turner an issue and given people like us something to write about that wasn't on his agenda.
Yeah, universality, the sacred trust of universality. He keeps using the sacred trust rather
loosely. Yes, I think there's a
loosely.
sacred trust syndrome. It's one of the aspects that I think he's going to have to be aware of. Just as someone observed of Mr. Trudeau that his meanness tended to be his undoing, rhetorical overkill sometimes could be the undoing of Mulroney.
Yeah, that sounds kind of bad. Does one not get a picture of a guy who obeys his handlers? He went through that campaign knowing that he was going to say the minimum possible, and we were not going to elect, we were going to buy a pig in a poke who was a Mulroney as laid down by the backroom boys and the pollsters of the Conservative Party. Is that not a fair assessment?
Yes, I think he was also reading his attitudinal data, though, and
What's attitudinal data? Please, Ian.
In his polling, the stuff that's underneath, not the intention to vote. For example, 67% of the respondents in their polling agreed with the assertion that it was time for a change. And that was essentially their whole slogan, that it was time for a change after 20 years of Liberal rule.
He would probably be the first to admit it was the hatred of the Liberals and Trudeau more than anything else that got him the job.
Probably in this part of the world, yes. Though not in Quebec.
Not in Quebec. No. Why not?
They
in
would have
Quebec?
voted for Trudeau in Quebec until the cows came home. Because he was a favorite son, because he's larger than life, because he's a hero in Quebec and always will be.
So when Trudeau said, keep talking to me like that and I'll run again, he would still have a base in Quebec anytime he
Oh,
comes
if
around?
Trudeau and even Chrétien, if Chrétien had won the Liberal leadership rather than Mr. Turner, Mulroney would have had a very hard time making the breakthrough that he did in French Canada. And that was the wager on which he had made his whole career.
But you were the first guy to tell me that. I was led to believe that Chrétien was in great public disrepute in Quebec, was regarded as a caricature of a French Canadian, and that they wouldn't have gone for Chrétien. I mean, we don't know, this is what we're told. Because as you know, we're so isolated by the media from the rest of the country, we don't know what the hell's going on.
You're talking to me about the Eastern media now?
Yes, I certainly am.
Of which I'm a member, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, I sympathize with that because I was up at 6:30 this morning trying to call the East, and I was being put on hold, which from Vancouver is a very expensive proposition.
I'll tell you what I like. There's one quote in the book that I've written down here. The Police Commission. We'll talk about that. We'll take calls to MacDonald too. If you care about Mulroney, he lives 30,000 miles away in Ottawa. He doesn't come to the West Coast at all. When he does come, he doesn't talk. He's got 19 members of the Tories in his British Columbia caucus, not one of whom is the least bit outstanding at this moment, nor is likely to be outstanding, because they're overweighed by the other 200 people in the caucus. So it might be the only chance you'll get, certainly this year, to get a question relayed to Mr. Mulroney through his very good friend and intimate and confidant, Ian MacDonald Mulroney, the making of the Prime Minister.
Hold it up, hold it up.
When did you last talk to this wee Irishman from Quebec?
Last night, sir.
Last night?
I had occasion to talk to him last night about something else, and he said to tell you two things. Mila sends her best, and that he has remembered his promise to do your program the next time he comes to the West Coast.
Well, tell him I'll take it under consideration after the break. I have a couple of personal memories of Mulroney. One sitting innocently in the Ritz-Carlton, the Garden Cafe, and suddenly finding there's a bottle of champagne there from a guy whom I've never even met. Right? Somebody had pointed me out to him. Another time chasing him around the Empress, trying to get him to talk when he was hiding during, which that would be the time he lost. What year was that?
76.
76. Like a will-o'-the-wisp he was, wasn't he? But he does look good in the Police Commission when he says, and I want to quote from your own book, he asked a longshoreman's union official, if 3 checkers working 6 hours can steal 8 cases of booze, how many cases can 5 checkers steal in 2 hours of overtime? Eh? That's the real Mulroney. That's not this pompous, soft-voiced little gent now with his hairstyling who wanders through the house saying nothing, wanders through the corridors saying nothing.
Yes, that was the Irishman in him, the fellow who would take a gamble and a roll of the dice and risk incurring the wrath, in this case, of the Labour Tribunal of Canada.
But he did do a good job in the Police Commission. How did he get involved in that in the first place?
Well, Robert Clich was, as you know, Jack, an NDPer, not such a rare species out here, but rarer in Quebec, a man of great culture and distinction, who had been one of Mulroney's professors of law at Laval University. He used to teach court procedure. When they had the rampage at James Bay in 1974, Mr. Bourassa appointed a non-liberal commission consisting of Clich, a fellow named Chevrette, who's today in the Levesque cabinet, and Mulroney as the Tory and management representative. And they successfully cleaned up the construction industry in Quebec, which was then the largest industry in the province, responsible for almost 15% of the gross domestic product. And the industry had been riven by terrible violence on the labor side and connivance on the management and government side.
This was really the first real public job he had ever done, was it not?
Yes, Mr. Bourassa says, and I think he's right, that the Clich Commission made Mulroney into a public figure. Before that, he had been, as you said, just a backroom boy.
And the other thing one must examine, or admire, of course, is the way he handled Schefferville. I thought he might have been slaughtered with the public eye over Schefferville. How did he pull that off? Because after all,
he talked his way out of it.
He was only a PR. He was just a PR lawyer. He didn't really run the company, did he?
He says he did. The fact is that Iron Ore had a $500 million long-term debt when he took it over, and 5 years later they were paying dividends. What that had to do with his management, I don't exactly know. The Schefferville thing is quite clearly an instance where he decided to carry the can himself for what was a very difficult decision in human as well as in business terms. Closing down a town is not something that
But he managed to pay
to
everybody off, and they all went away happy, did they not?
Essentially, yes.
Now, where did he run in the election again?
In Manicouagan on the north shore of Quebec, and Schefferville was in the riding, and he won 3 polls out of 5 there.
Wasn't that the place where the Liberals had put in more millions of Piola than in almost any other riding in Quebec?
In fact, they announced a national park in the middle of the campaign.
Hundreds of millions they'd put in
sure.
over the years.
Sure, and they had a good local member, and Mulroney beat him by 21,000 votes.
How much better is Mulroney's French than Turner's? I was always led to believe that Turner was a good speaker of French, but doesn't speak the argot.
Mulroney's French is as good as Trudeau's English, and every bit as streetwise as Trudeau's was.
So he switches
idiomatically back and forth.
Well, Trudeau has a couple of faults in English, which small ones, like calling reporters "you fellows," for instance. Go back to the gay 30s. What about the famous fishing trip with Finlay MacDonald, Dalton Camp, and Mulroney?
Well, he says that more has been made of, this is in 1982, that more has been made of that than he would have read into it. But clearly he was getting some advice from people like Dalton Camp that he couldn't be the point man of the operation in terms of unseating Clark. So I think this is why essentially he got himself out of the road, as he put it. It may have been a sanctimonious, hypocritical operation, but it probably served its purpose, although it contributed to his trust problems and to what was known as the sleaze factor.
Dalton Camp, is he still in there, thick with the birds? Eh? Is he a big influence on
I don't think so, no. No, I think he's back in the good graces of the party. I don't think you'd say he was a major influence with Mulroney.
And I notice he's being very profligate with our public funds again, Mulroney, is he not? Who is paying for the sauna bath that's going into 24 Sussex Drive? Sauna bath and $100,000 in improvement, and they've already squandered millions in Stornoway.
Well, I think that's a question for his press secretary, Bill Fox, but he says he's paying for the hot tub, not the sauna, the hot tub himself, and is paying for the dish over at Harrington Lake himself, I suppose, so he can bring in programs like this one.
As a matter of fact, there's some truth in that right now. Somebody in Ottawa wants sauna so they can watch Webster on the West Coast. Not that we count, at least, and Mr. Mafia.
Oh, come on, Jack. Everybody in the East cares what Jack Webster thinks.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Anyway, I suppose he'll last for at least one session, won't he?
I think his agenda, to be serious, is 2 terms and out. He thinks that if you can't do the job within 8 years, that you're just going to end up hanging around as Trudeau did forever, and breaking longevity records of lauriers and things like that.
It's wonderful how these new prime ministers always. Bennett did the same here, 2 terms and out. Of course, he's going to stay until they carry him away.
But I think he would have to be incompetent on the scale of Diefenbaker to be defeated in one election.
But can he hold that miserable group together? I say miserable, not really meaning it. You've got the Pinko Tories, you've got the St. Stevens, you've got all the guys with the local things. How can he hold that mob together?
I think what he's trying to do is transform the party of Dan McKenzie into a party that modern urban people in Canada can identify with. And that's the real long-term threat to the Liberals and even the NDP, If Mulroney seizes the center ground in Canada and holds it, if the people in the cities, if the linguistic and ethnic minorities give him not one vote, because they already have, but two, then he will be in the process perhaps of building an enduring electoral dynasty.
An enduring electoral dynasty. Well, let's try something. You've got one segment to talk to L. Ian MacDonald. What's the L stand for?
Lawrence.
L. Ian MacDonald used to be a television critic. He's written What They Say is a very good book about Mulroney. I didn't like it. But it's worth buying if you can spare the money for Christmas. You may speak to MacDonald if you wish, now, for one segment only, after the break. Go ahead to L. Ian MacDonald, author of The Making of the Prime Minister Mulroney. That's you. It's great fun this morning, isn't it? Go ahead to Ian MacDonald.
Okay, I want to ask Mr. MacDonald if he can tell me anything more about the no vote of Canada in the UN's Political Affairs Committee just recently in the last couple of weeks.
Does this reflect
on a proposed bilateral peace treaty on nuclear weapons?
That's Doug Roche.
No, I'm sorry. I've been...
I don't know anything either. Go ahead.
I've been out flogging this book. I haven't been following our...
Go ahead from Kitibat, please.
Ian, it seems to me that Mulroney rhymes with Mahoney. What is this man's name, Mulroney or Mulrooney?
Mulrooney, he says, not Mulroney, although apparently some people in Ireland pronounce it Mulroney. The provenance of that is that his great-grandfather was a man named Pierce Mulroney who came to Canada in 1832. There was no O, or there was no second O in the name. It was not O Mulroney or Mulroney with two O's. It's always been spelled that way, and there are apparently tombstones at St. Catherine de Pont-Neuf in Quebec to prove it.
Are you a close friend of his?
Am I a close friend of his? I knew him, I've known him for a long time. I suppose I was his friend when he was in private life.
And you're a political reporter?
And will be again when he's no longer.
Is it not dangerous to become the recipient of confidence from a prime minister? Does that not muzzle you too?
I worry about it, and if it ever becomes a problem, I'll get out of the business, I think.
Yeah, because you are a very close friend of his.
Well, I would. You know, you don't go around saying you're a friend of the Prime Minister. It sounds like name dropping.
It does, doesn't it? But we know that. We've seen it in other publications. Go ahead, please.
Don't believe everything you read.
From Victoria. I don't believe anything I read. Go ahead from Victoria.
Mr. MacDonald?
Yes, ma'am.
I have, I'm 100% behind Mr. Mulroney, and you have a new admirer, but you must remember, Mr. Webster is never going to forgive Mr. Mulroney for refusing to come on his show, no matter what happens. And unfortunately...
I think it was good for the ratings myself.
That's a cheap, sleazy remark of the kind of sleaze that your leader might indulge in. And I'm going to cut you off in a snip. It was not for the ratings. Go ahead, please.
Hey, you mentioned Bill Fox's name there a few minutes ago. I've been curious, wondering where I've seen him before. What's his background, just briefly?
Well, he looked like a heavy from a B-grade movie, but he's a reporter from the Toronto Star, isn't that right?
He looks like a bodyguard.
Yeah.
But he's used to be with Southern News in Ottawa, before that in Quebec, and after that he was bureau chief of the Toronto Star in Ottawa.
Didn't he say he was going to quit when the campaign was over?
He was making threatening noises about that, yeah.
Has he now been suborned by the power and the perks of working for Mulroney?
I think you have to ask him that, Jack.
You haven't asked him that. I'll ask him anyway. I nearly fell over dead when I heard that Fox was going to work for a politician. Go ahead, please.
Well, that's a conspiracy of Irishmen, I think.
Go ahead, please.
You're friendly with Mulroney, or do you admire him? What has he got going for him? I would like to mention 5 things that have been cut by him. The CBC, slashed, 85 million about, Canada Council budget, National Film Board, CRTC, National Arts Centre, Department of Communications, all cut. Doesn't he go for these thrills at all?
Well, I think that's a question to be put to a spokesman for the government, ma'am, but...
What do you think of it?
You must admire him for something. What do you admire him for?
For becoming Prime Minister.
I think that someone who at that age is able to go into politics with an agenda, and he has one. The first one was to get his party elected and to create to turn a 30% party into a 40 or 45% party, to make the Conservative Party a moderate force rather than a collection of dinosaurs.
Any more moderation? The other name for that is repression.
Yeah. And what about the 20,000 jobs we'll probably lose in the civil service? Nobody's telling the blunt facts in this government. They're going to be hiding behind fences and blaming each other.
Yeah, I think the government's still on its honeymoon, Jack. There's no doubt about that.
Not out here, it ain't.
Its approval rating is in the high 60s, low 70s.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. MacDonald, being a young, aspiring Conservative youth in the party, I've understand, it's come to my attention that Mr. Mulroney used to know Prime Minister Diefenbaker. How did that come about? How did he make that connection, being so young? And that just interested me.
Well, as Jack can tell you, sir, Mulroney's never been very much of a shrinking violet, and I think he just marched up and introduced himself to John Diefenbaker when he was a 16-year-old university freshman or sophomore.
And hung around quite a bit.
Oh, sure, and until they gave him something to do, and then when he was studying law at Laval, he would call Diefenbaker, and Diefenbaker wasn't getting very much good advice on Quebec in those days, as you know.
And he became an advisor on Quebec at that young age.
At the age of 22 or 23.
He had an input of common sense from Quebec.
And once even produced Diefenbaker into the law faculty at Laval on a dare from his fellow students.
Good for him. I like that part of him. Go ahead from Prince George.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what happened to all the promises.
Ian will just tell you, you'll have to ask a spokesman of the Conservative Party. We know they were all BS. We'll just have to wait and see him not deliver.
I think that's politics.
Yeah.
I think Mulroney is being like Bennett, selfish as heck. Bennett, 1986, is the end of the world as far as he's concerned, and the people don't matter. It concerns education and hospitals and stuff.
We'll have to ask a spokesman for the Tory party. Ian, thanks very much. You once wrote a nice television review about me 10 years ago or 13 years ago.
I can't imagine why.
I wish you well in the book.
Thank you.
You're not autographing anywhere?
No. I'll autograph this one for you if you want.
Autograph that one for me.
Okay.
Sign it, Love, Venus de Milo. My thanks. Next, we're going to fight a war in Europe all over again. Briefly, brutally, and bluntly, after the break. All kinds of generals have written all kinds of books about the Second World War, except there's been a great paucity of Canadian fighting soldiers writing their book. I have one here this morning, Brigadier General Denis Whitaker of the Rileys.
Right.
Is that your own regiment?
Right.
The Royal Hamilton Light Infantry. Written a book called the Tug of War about the Battle of the Scheldt Estuary. And you are the only Canadian military commander who's written a blunt book about these damn politicians and the stupid decisions made over your head, right?
That's absolutely right. The first commander in the field to write a book about the Canadian Army's participation.
And this is your co-author, and your name, ma'am?
Shelagh, sir. Shelagh Whitaker.
You are the wife of the Brigadier General.
Aren't I lucky?
Well, you may well be. You certainly seem to be happy enough. But let me get this battle straight. This was after the taking of Antwerp, the Battle of the Scheldt Estuary, in which 12,000 Canadian casualties may have been unnecessarily killed and wounded. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You tell the story.
Well, what happened was the British captured Antwerp on the 4th of September. The 5th of September was known as Dalle Dinsdag, which means Crazy Tuesday in Dutch. And this applied to the Dutch in Holland and the people in Belgium. And they felt a great feeling of elation. They felt the war was going to be over. They were going to be liberated in the next few days. They all went crazy. They kicked the Germans out of town. They looted all their stores and just had a hell of a time. And unfortunately, the British didn't follow up. They stopped. And as a result, the Germans came back in 2 or 3 days' time, and as a result, the gate which was open was closed. The Germans were able to refurbish their defenses, and the war went on for another 6 months.
Who made the decision that the British wouldn't follow through and cut off the Germans on the corner there? Who made that decision?
Well, there was no decision made to do it. Eisenhower did not make the decision. Montgomery did not make a decision to go ahead. The feeling of euphoria on Dolly Dinsdag permeated the whole of the Allied command.
But your commander, Guy Simmons, was it Guy Simmons?
Guy Simmons, right.
He was a Canadian general in the field.
That's right.
He wanted to follow through, did he not?
That's right, he did. But he was not allowed. His plan, his original plan, was turned down by General Crerar, and he was not allowed to proceed with it.
What a mess.
It was a mess.
One of the things in the book which intrigues Canadians of today was the total lack of trained reinforcements in a time when units like the Rileys and others, Canadian Scottish were there, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
Were suffering heavy casualties. Were you actually being given totally untrained men?
Well, we certainly were. What happened was this. Before D-Day, estimates were made with regard to casualties. They said 50% would be infantry. As the fighting progressed after D-Day, they were 75% infantry. So quickly, the reinforcement stream was used up. Now, the people in London had made a mistake, but they were trying to hide it. They didn't want to admit it. So what they did was they hit upon the scheme of remustering excess personnel from other arms. For instance, from the Army Service Corps, the Ordnance Corps, even some Air Force ground troops were told, okay, today you're in the Army Service Corps, tomorrow you're in the infantry.
No training.
And no training. They didn't know how to use infantry weapons. They knew nothing about tactics. This is a situation that has never been dealt with before in any writing that I know of.
Now, Sheila, can you tell me who was to blame for that botch up?
Well, I would say Mackenzie King. I'd take it right to the top, and the Canadian government.
The ghost of Mackenzie King. Well, he was alive and well in those days.
Yes, sir.
Were these people, and I don't know much about that era of Canadian politics, were they zombies?
No, that's a different problem. There are two problems. The remustering was going on probably without the knowledge or consent of Parliament. It was going on to save some political skins, I think, within the military.
To be able to say we've sent 2,500 bodies from here to there.
Right.
The wrong bodies.
That's it. So at one point, Ralston went over. He was the defense minister. He went to the front lines to see for himself what the story was. And when we say front lines, we're talking about the distance from Burnaby here to downtown Vancouver. That's how close he was to the front line. And when he got there, he talked to all the commanders. He went to the hospitals and talked to the wounded. He came back and he informed Mackenzie King that, yes, they needed troops, but he never said that the men that were fighting, the Canadians that were volunteers that were fighting, were untrained men. He simply didn't bring this subject up. And by omission, all these men were killed.
The person who triggered the row in Parliament was Connie Smythe. And Connie Smythe was wounded, and badly wounded in Normandy, and he was in hospital for a good long time. And during that time, he questioned a lot of people. When he was finally sent home in the middle of September, he went to George McCullough, publisher of the Globe and Mail, and broke the story right across Canada, and there was hell to pay.
God bless Connie Smythe. It's the first good thing I've ever heard about the guy. He was the fellow who came out here and tried to con us into an incredible... He wanted us to give him the whole of downtown Vancouver, and for that we would get some two-bit hockey arena that held 20,000 people. Now, what has happened since you've written this book? Have you had any political repercussions at all?
No, we haven't. We've had a lot of congratulatory notes.
Is Guy Simmons alive and well these days?
No, he died in 1972.
Tell me about, what was a zombie?
A zombie was a member of the National Resources...
MNR, what is it?
MNRA.
MNRA.
These were guys who were conscripted. They were conscripted, but they didn't have to go overseas.
Yeah, conscripted for service in Canada. Then in 1942, they had a Bill 80, which allowed these people to be sent overseas. But Mackenzie King would not bring himself to send them over or give the word for them to go. And they vacillated around from October through to January, when the first bunch were supposed to go over. 10,000 of them were to go, and half of them went AWL and didn't ever get in the boat.
Did you come through the Battle of the Scheldt Estuary unscathed yourself?
Yes, I was lucky.
Eh? And you wrote this book with the old man.
Yes, I did.
Tell me,
Yes.
do you
It was
call
a
him
great
sir?
experience.
Do you call the general sir?
No, sir, I don't.
Well, and I know it's a good book. It's got rave reviews. It's Tug of War, the Canadian victory that opened Antwerp. I wish I could give you more time, but I can't.
Well, that's very good of you.
My thanks
I
to
appreciate it.
Brigadier General Denis Whitaker, and his gorgeous wife, Shelagh Whitaker. And I'll be back with Petula Clark, singing, dancing, and frolicking after the break. I adamantly refuse to believe that this young, beautiful woman here entertained the troops during the Second World War.
Yes, I did.
Well, explain it to me, please. You don't have to tell me your age, but how the hell could you have entertained troops during the Second World War? That would make you as old as I am.
Well, I did start very young. You probably did too, right?
Entertaining the troops? No, I started. Matter of fact, I started when I was born, beside my mother. But you did entertain troops during World War II.
Yes, I did. I started when I was about 6, and then during the war, I was a child prodigy. I used to go around singing for the troops. I used to travel around in troop trains. I used to sleep in the luggage racks. It was great. It got me out of school. And I had a great time. There was another little girl doing the same sort of thing. Her name was Julie Andrews. We both did all of that.
There was another little girl doing the same thing, singing yours, called Vera Lind. Oh, she was a little older.
Well, yes. No, she was the force's sweetheart. I was the force's little girl. I represented all the kids who'd been left behind. You know.
Where were you born in England, Petula?
I was born...
You don't mind if I mimic your toffee-nosed accent?
Well, if you don't mind if I mimic your Scots accent.
That's not bad.
That's not bad.
That's not bad.
I was born just outside London in a place called West Ewell, but I always say Epsom because it sounds more posh, and most people know where Epsom is.
Yeah, no, who the hell has ever heard of West Ewell?
Precisely.
Now, I want to get your reading on today's music.
Yes.
What do you make of these disgustingly androgynous characters who are presented as the living end these days?
Like who?
Boy George.
Boy George is...
David Bowie.
Oh, no, we're not talking about the same thing.
Is that not the same thing?
No. David is an extremely talented guy.
A great singer.
Yes, and he's very, very talented, and he's done some wonderful things. He surrounds himself with very good people, too. He has good taste. Boy George, I don't think even Boy George takes himself very seriously.
No, it's a put-on, isn't it?
Yes, but he's written some very popular music, and I mean, if he wanted to write a song for me, I would be delighted. He's a good, popular songwriter.
But you yourself now, are you taking life pretty easily?
Easily?
Yeah.
Yes, but you know, I've been singing, as I said, ever since I was a kid. So I mean, it doesn't even feel like work to me. I really enjoy doing
it's
what I do.
It's like my job here. I just love to come in every morning.
You love it, do you?
And do my little ham bone for the pub.
I don't think I could do it every morning.
Oh no, it's just beautiful. I can do it every morning.
Good for you.
You're married?
Yes,
Three
sure.
kids?
3 kids, yes.
Still married?
Yes.
Same guy?
Yes.
Only once?
Once.
Oh, it's impossible.
It's
I don't
amazing,
believe you.
isn't it? Amazing, yeah.
First person I've ever spoken to on this program who's only been married once and still
I
with the
know.
same husband and got 3 kids.
Precisely. It's not bad, is it?
Not bad. Your favourite movie was what?
The one that I made?
The one you made more than one movie.
No, but you mean out of all the movies I've made?
Yeah.
Finian's Rainbow.
Has that got music in it?
Of course it's got music in it. Fred Astaire. You remember Fred Astaire?
Remember him? Oh, God, yes, I grew up with him. But I can't remember you in Goodbye, Mr. Chips. It says here you were in Goodbye, Mr. Chips.
I was in the second version of Goodbye, Mr. Chips with Peter O'Toole.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry to talk about all these Irish things, but you know.
No, I don't mind. I think Irishmen are quite nice if you keep them in the place. How close a friend were you to Charlie Chaplin?
Quite close.
He
Yes,
was a
I
great
was.
guy,
Yes, I got to know him quite well. He was already, you know, a very old man when I got to know him. He lived in Switzerland, and I live in Switzerland. And we went. I used to go over and see him regularly, and he had the most fantastic stories about London, you know, about the real old Cockney
Yeah,
London.
he was great.
And he was brilliant man.
You're singing at the International Plaza, the Plaza show, December 5, which is
right.
Wednesday through December 15.
Yes, 10 days.
10 days.
Yes.
Then you're off to where after that?
Well, I go back to London for a day to unpack and repack, and then I have to go to Paris for a couple of days because...
Do you live in Paris?
No, I live in Geneva in Switzerland, but I have a whole French career, you see.
Why do you live in... Oh, of course, you're the kind of regarded as an Edith, what's her name? Piaf. Piaf, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Well, that's it.
Is that good enough?
It'll do. Well, somebody called me the English Piaf, but I've never been able to see that myself. But I take it as a compliment, but Piaf was a very, she sang about death and destruction and madness and love.
She was threatening.
No, she saw the dark side of life and you know, put it over in her songs. I'm more optimistic than Piaf.
That's great to see you, though,
Thank you.
Petula Clark. You're one of my early childhood memories.
Really?
No, you're not. One of my middle-aged memories, but you were just a little child. We're going to talk some more with Petula, and we're going to take your calls to Petula Clark. Now, after the break, please. Go, take it away. You make me feel young again, Petula.
Really? Good.
Go ahead from mission to Petula Clark.
Oh, good morning. Especially good morning to Petula Clark. Don't
Good morning.
shudder, but this is a voice out of your past.
Oh, dear.
I'm going to throw a few names at you.
Yes.
See what your reaction is.
Okay.
Moor Lane School.
Oh,
mean
yes.
anything to you?
Of course.
Schoolmaster Mr. Lovelace.
Oh, yes.
And Cop Gilders and Bonesgate Pub.
Oh, yes. Fantastic. Who are you?
I come from Chesington, and I used to live on Mount Road.
Yes.
Bonesgate Pub was right at the end of the road there.
Fantastic.
You both had your first pink gins in Bonesgate Pub.
Don't be silly. Pink
Pink
gins?
gins in those days were
No
very
way.
rare animals, believe me.
No, we were parked outside the pub, right, with a lemonade and a packet of crisps, right?
You're so right.
You want to give me your name?
Oh, I'd be delighted. My name is Haddon, Hadden, married to a Scotchman.
Uh-huh.
And I used to be Mavis Sadler. It doesn't mean anything to you, I'm sure.
Well, you go and see
Well-
Petula and say hello to her at the International Plazas.
That would be...
I'd love to.
I would love to see
By
you.
the way, as one last request, Petula, is there any chance of you repeating your Blackamoor's Head routine of imitating Carmen Miranda?
Now, you mean? I doubt it. Oh,
Anytime.
Yeah.
like talking to you, and I've been watching your career.
Okay. She's going to give you 4 bars of imitating Carmen Miranda. Yeah.
Well, I have to have the bananas on my head and all that stuff.
You can't
think
do
your
without
staff
bananas.
could lay on some bananas? No. I like you very much. I think you're grand.
You still got the touch.
Thank you, Mavis. Thank you, Mavis. Let's see the clip. Where's the clip? Haven't got a monitor. We'll have to watch it up there.
Okay.
That was in the Albert Hall.
At the Albert Hall with the London Symphony Orchestra.
I wondered who the small group was. that you
Yes,
had.
we don't happen to have the London Symphony Orchestra with
Was
us.
that as big as downtown?
Subway?
Yeah.
Not quite as big. I love it, actually. I think I almost prefer it to downtown. Dare I say it?
Go ahead, please, from Agassi.
Oh, Petula, I'm going to take you back 20 years to the London Motorboat Club. You may remember giving me a medal, I'm boasting now, for winning the first 100-mile motorboat race at Chertsey. Do you remember?
I do, and didn't I have a terrible little boat there? I attempted to race myself. It was a fiberglass boat.
That's right. We were demonstrating fiberglass boats, and after the event, you had to go around with... you enjoyed yourself.
I was terrified. I was terrified. I remember...
Anyhow, I'm living over here in Canada now, and I just thought I'd say hello to you.
Fine. Are you still racing? Are you still doing all that stuff?
Well, not now. I'm 72, and it gets a bit hectic.
Gets a bit bumpy. Gets a bit bumpy.
Well, it's lovely talking to you.
Well, good.
Okay, I'll give your regards to all the boys back in London when I go over there.
Please do.
In Chertsey.
In Chertsey, yeah.
In Chertsey?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great. I remember it very well.
Wonder what other friends of yours were going to turn up
Yeah,
this morning.
well, the skeleton's coming out the
It's
cupboard
quite
now.
incredible, isn't it? Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, good morning, Pet.
Good morning.
As you were very fondly known when you were growing up.
That's right.
But
Still
I think
am.
your best movie that I remember you of was Dance Hall.
Oh, yes, yes.
Do you know?
Yes, that was with Di Dawes.
Hi, Hazel.
Hi,
Who
Hazel.
was the singer?
No, it was Greta Gint was in Dance Hall. She played the singer.
Uh-huh. But anyway, I thought that was fabulous. I really did. And remember when you used to sing The Changing Guard at Buckingham Palace?
Yes, I do.
Did you sing that?
Yes,
Changing the
yes,
Guard
I'm
at
afraid I
Buckingham
did.
Palace?
Yes, I did. Yes.
As a little girl?
Yes, as a darling little girl.
Did they call you Pet?
They did. Well, they still call me Pet. Yes.
Can I call you Pet?
Oh, yes, you may.
How do you pronounce it? Petula or Petula?
Petula.
I'll call you Eula. Yeah, go on.
Yes.
Well, speak up.
Pet.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, your name, we all called you Pet at the time.
That's
but
right.
anyway, myself and 5 other friends are going to see you next Monday night.
Great. Well, I look forward. Can we say hello afterwards?
I would love to.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Lovely.
Thank
look forward
you.
to it.
I want the guy with the motorboat to go too and bring his motorboat with him.
72, that's marvellous.
What do you mean it's not that marvellous? I'm getting close to myself. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Petula. Welcome to Vancouver.
Thank you.
I have many great memories of you, the old Chiswick Empire, places like that. But I seem to recall, and in this country of soap operas, that you used to be in a soap opera with Jack Warner and Kathleen Harrison when you were a little girl. Am I not right?
Well, it wasn't a soap opera. We did a series of 3 films called The Huggets. The Huggets was the name of the family, and Jack Warner and Kathleen Harrison, Susan Shaw, Di Dawes, Anthony Newley, we were all in it. And I was the youngest daughter in it, and they were made on a shoestring in a terrible little sort of flea-ridden studio in Islington. And they were great fun, and they were very popular. They really were.
Thank you, sir. Is Diana Dawes dead?
Yes, she died not very long ago, and it's a terribly tragic story because her husband was so heartbroken he committed suicide afterwards. And I mean, it's just the most awful story.
Yeah,
She was
saw
the
that
loveliest lady. She was a really nice woman.
More calls to Pet Clark after the break. The Petula Clark, your call. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack. How are you?
Don't talk to me. Talk to Pet.
He doesn't want to talk to me.
Petula,
Yes.
the Finian's Rainbow was one of my all-time favorites.
Good.
And
Good.
I just want to let you know that one of your co-stars was Don Franks from East Vancouver. Do you recall Don Franks?
Very, very well, yes.
Is he still around?
Yes, he is.
Oh.
Yes, he is. I don't know what he's doing, but if he's somewhere in the country, I would really like to speak to him. Does he still have his pigtails?
Yes, I believe so. I believe he's residing in Toronto now.
I thought he lived in a tent on the North Shore playing Indian.
Well, I think that's over with now, Jack. I think he's back to suburban living.
Do I know your voice, old chap?
Yes, you helped me out in 1970, Jack.
Oh, I
My
remember.
wife was 8 months pregnant, and I was trying to get out of a snowbank.
What did I do?
Walking by, and you said, "Here, I'll help you." So you helped me push my car out of the snowbank. I want to thank you for it.
I was not the father of the child.
He denied it.
The wife was
So I won't
already...
put that blame on you.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad you like Finian's Rainbow. It's really one of my favourite films, and I might be doing a song or two from that on my show.
Go
'Cause I
ahead,
love it.
please. Go ahead to Petula.
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, good morning, Petula.
Good morning.
I want to cast your memory back to May 1971
Yes.
in Monte Carlo.
Yes.
I believe you came to the reception after the Grand Prix. I think it's the Hotel de Paris.
That's right. Absolutely.
I won the Formula 3 race there the day before.
You did?
And I think, if I remember correctly, you walked in with Lulu, Barry Gibb, A group of you all walked in together.
That's right. That's it, yes.
I was sitting with Emerson Fittipaldi. I drove for Team Lotus, John Player Special.
Great. What's your name?
Dave Walker.
Right. Oh, great. Are you living here now?
Won cars in 72 with Emerson. That was the year that Jack Bradman was leading the race and crashed on the last lap, and Jochen came through and won it on the last lap.
Absolutely. I remember it
The
very...
reception at the, I think it's the Hotel de Paris, isn't it? Opposite the casino.
Absolutely. Beautiful, beautiful hotel.
Lulu was that wee Glasgow girl that used to belt out the songs.
What do you mean used to? She still does.
Does
She's
she?
marvellous, Lulu.
I hope to see you at the Blue when you're showing there.
Please come.
Everybody watches Webster. Formula 3 car drive winners, people with 100-mile motorboat runs, people who went to the Bones... What's the name of that pub that you used to drink in?
Those were the great days.
The Bones
didn't
days.
drink in
You
it.
did so drink. I bet you still drink pink gin.
Never touch the stuff.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Pat. Do
Good
you
morning.
remember in 1954, 55, I saw you appearing with Frankie Vaughan, Diana Dawes, I think it was Robert Beatty. Do you remember where that was?
No, where would that be?
That was in Liverpool. Litherland, near Liverpool.
Oh, it could be, yes.
Yeah, it was in a huge marquee. It
What?
was something to do with Littlewoods. You don't remember that?
Well, listen, I've done so many peculiar things.
I realise that. But it was so unusual at the time. You had your hair dyed sort of orange colour, and it was 10 years before the times, you know, and you look so delightful.
Thank you.
Do you remember that?
Did you think I looked delightful with orange hair?
And anyway, I saw you again in the O'Keefe Centre years ago in Toronto. It cost me $20 in a taxi to get to your show.
Was it worth it?
I think the ticket was only $10. I would have paid $40 in a taxi to see that show. It was fabulous.
Oh, well, listen, do you live in Vancouver?
Yes, yes.
Well,
Not far from the International Plaza.
Well, you're going to come along to see us?
Yes, I will.
Because the show is a little different to the one I did at the O'Keefe, but I think it's probably better. I feel better about it.
Wednesday night through Monday night.
That's right, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you'd finished. Go ahead, please.
Is that me?
That's you, Mac.
Hello, Pat.
Hello.
I want to go way back to 1952 to Film Stars Garden Party in Morden Hall in Surrey.
Yes, yes.
We got your autographs, the wife and I, in those days. And there was Errol Flynn, Dane Clark, yourself, Diana Dawes,
Listen.
all the starlets of that era.
I thought that was the most exciting thing. I used to love going to those things. I was a fan myself. I mean, I used to go along as a film star, but in fact I was completely sort of knocked out with it all myself. And my father was a very handsome man. He looked like Errol Flynn. And it was at one of those garden parties, probably the one you're talking about, actually. My father was escorting me, and one of Errol Flynn's fans was so convinced that my dad was Errol Flynn that she bit him on the leg.
That right.
And my father treasured it. I mean, he just wouldn't let that thing heal up.
Errol Flynn died tragically in this town.
Did he really?
He died in this town.
Really?
After consuming a lot of alcohol and
Yeah.
having a very sharp heart attack.
Yes, yes.
I just want to say you're looking pretty good.
Thank
We're
you.
all in the same age group.
Well,
She looks
thank
smashing.
you.
For 35, she looks just fantastic. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Pat.
Good morning.
Morning. Yes, I was born in Sheen, but I went to school in West Yule.
Yes.
Well, that's great.
We won't hold that against you.
Did you go to the same pub?
Probably where I went to the Green Man and places like that.
The Green Man in Sheen?
In Yule.
In Yule.
What's all this about pubs? I didn't go to pubs. I used to get parked outside. My dad used to drive a motorbike and sidecar.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, very flashy stuff.
Familiar with Yule Castle's boys' school?
No. She doesn't know about your
anything
Castle
about boys'
School.
schools at
Go
all.
ahead from Kelowna, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
I want to take you back, Pat, to the Blitz. And I think it was probably the first concert you ever did.
The Blitz?
Yeah. During the 40s, and I was taken by my father and mother to see you sing Alice Blue Gown. You were dressed completely in blue.
Of course.
I think you must have been between 6 and 8 years old, and it was in Kingston.
That's true. Absolutely. You're not talking about Bentalls, are you, in Kingston?
No. It was a concert given to the Air Raid Wardens.
That's right.
And my father was an Air Raid Warden, and we went to this concert, and I think it was your debut.
It probably was, darling. It probably
And
was.
then the next week you were on the radio, and there was a raging air raid going on, but we sat and listened to you.
That's right.
Isn't that wonderful to
that's
hear?
really. I remember it very, very vaguely, but it's absolutely true. Kingston was our local big
I
town.
grew up around you because we did the usual thing that everybody in Kingston does on Saturday. We went to Bent Hall.
That's right.
And quite often saw you riding down the escalator with your sister, Barbara.
That's right, yeah. Well, but Barbara, she's, you know, we spent a lot of time together. She's a very happy lady and very busy. I'll tell her all about this.
Nice
She'll
place.
love it.
Kingston upon Thames.
That's right.
And it's just like old home week. I didn't realize there were so many people from Surrey.
It's funny,
the
isn't it?
Vancouver area.
Go see it at the Plaza. We'll be back with one final segment after the break. This is your life, Petula Clark.
Yes, it certainly is, isn't it? My
Just
goodness.
incredible number of people who
It's
come from
lovely.
Surrey,
It's lovely.
especially West Ewell. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Petula.
Hello.
Hello. You may not remember my name. My name is Jim Coombs. I used to be a trombone player with the Ted Heath Orchestra.
Really?
Really?
Fantastic.
And I made some of the first recordings you ever made in your young life with the Ted Heath band.
But did you know Jackie Armstrong and?
Sure. Yes.
Well, he's still playing, and then Kenny Baker is still playing, and Jack Parnell obviously is still playing. I mean, it's they're still around. Are you? How about you? Are you still playing?
Oh, sure. I'm getting on in years a little, but I still play.
Fantastic. That's great.
But I was just talking to my wife about the early years of your career, which you were quite a youngster, you're around about 9 years of age or something like that when we made the first recordings with you.
Jimmy, thank you
That's
very
right.
much indeed.
Absolutely.
I think every person you ever knew in England has moved
Yes.
to British Columbia.
I'm waiting for a grotty one to come along. Something really,
skeleton
real
in the
skeleton.
closet. Go ahead, please.
Petula Clark?
Yes, present.
I remember you now going back to a village in South Wales called Pontlotin, and I went to school with your relative Shirley Rose and Clive Rose.
Yes.
And I believe your auntie Nurse Rose.
Yes.
I remember you. My dad took me to hear you singing "Sweetest Little Fellow" in our church, Nazareth Church in Pontlotin.
That's right. Well, you're Welsh then.
Yes. So I understand that Clive is now living in Toronto. Is that true?
Yes. Well, he's living somewhere in Canada. I mean,
but do you remember Pontlotin?
Oh, do I remember Pontlotin? Some of the dearest, fondest memories of my life are in Pontlotin.
Yeah, you were very young, but I remember going to hear you sing, and right up in the church there, you sang "Sweetest Little Fellow," and I never forgotten that.
Listen, I would sing anywhere, listen, I'm here, I'm singing here. So, I just go on singing anywhere,
Well,
No. Pontlotin, Vancouver.
Wonderful. None of us will now ever forget Pontlotin.
Oh, Uncle Bert.
Sweetest little fellow, Uncle Bert and all the
Uncle
Rosies.
Bert,
Yeah, I
yes.
know.
And what was the name of the chemist on the square?
Evans the chemist.
That Evans the chemist. And
Right.
there were two
I'm
great...
going to bring my wife to come and see you.
Great.
And when is it? Thursday?
It's
We open
Wednesday through
Wednesday.
Monday. That includes Wednesday and Monday, doesn't it? Wednesday
It does.
through Monday.
Well, it was very nice talking to you.
Lovely talking to you. See you at the place, wherever we're working. What is it?
Bye.
The Pizzazz, yes.
Pizzazz. That was the man from Pontlotin in South Wales.
It's great. I love it.
Go ahead, old friend of Petula Clark.
Yes, that song, This Is My Song.
Yes.
How did you come about that? Did you actually meet the Chaplin family or not?
Well, no, Chaplin had written it for the film, Countess from Hong Kong, and a lot of people found it rather corny. In fact, I must say I found it rather corny. But Charlie sort of really insisted that I do it, and my husband, who's French, thought that it was very commercial, and so I did it, and I recorded it immediately in French, English, German, and Italian, and it was a hit in all those countries anyway, and all over the world.
Well, I think it really suits you, and I'm glad you did it.
Thank you. Well, I'll be doing it here too. I mean, it is a great song.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. A little trivia question. I just wonder if you could tell me who Billy J. Kramer's sister was, and if she was a singer.
Billy J. Kramer's sister, was she a singer?
I really don't know. I don't know. Do you know? I mean, is this a sort of quiz?
It was a trivia question at one time, and nobody seems to find out. I work with a...
Who the hell was Billy J. Kramer?
Pardon?
Who was Billy J. Kramer?
He was a singer, you know.
Well,
Yes.
sorry.
No,
sister,
sorry, I can't help you there.
Can't help you on that.
Yeah, thank you.
If we don't know, nobody knows. Any time for any more? Quick one, quick one.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
quickly.
Hello, Petula Clark?
Yes?
Yes, I remember. Well, when I was 10 years old, I used to play your record over and over again. I only had your one, Color My World.
Yes.
Colour your world, and
Great.
that's where we've got to colour our particular world. Petula, you've been a riot of joy and laughter.
Thank
Memories,
you.
nostalgia, motorboats, Pondlotten, Formula 3 drivers, and God knows
Bonesgate
what
Pub.
else. Yeah, Bonesgate Pub at the Plaza's, Wednesday this week through Monday. Gotta go. Thank you very much.
I've had a
Petula.
lovely time.
You have been an absolute gem.
I loved
from
it.
Cheam and Richmond or Kingston, whatever the hell it was.
West Ewell.
After the break. Tomorrow we're going to take a close look at all these murders in the Sick Children's Hospital in Toronto and the Grange Commission. Dreadful state of affairs. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. precisely.